How old were you during World War II?
About 7.
And where did you live?
When it started, I lived in a small town called Rock Ferry, which is in the county of Cheshire in England, but the part that made it rather more into the war was the fact that we lived across from Liverpool, which at that time was the largest port in the UK, and the port in which all the countries from North America came into.
How did it impact your daily life?
In the beginning, there wasn't really a lot of impact in the beginning, apart from news reports, but the first air raid on Liverpool took place in September. I think, if I remember right, it was about 1940, and we gone over to my grandmother's, which was about a 60-mile trip, and I remember it being a really nice day, and on the way back, we knew it was an air raid. We looked, and from quite a ways out, you could see the glow in the sky. And when we got into Liverpool, the whole city was just basically on fire. The whole downtown part of Liverpool, the docks, the ship repair yards had been heavily bombed, and there was a lot of fire and debris and everything all over the place. In fact, they really stopped trying to put the fires out. They were just shoveling the debris into the buildings, and that was the best they could do, because the water mains were all messed up. There was not a lot of water pressure, and it was a really bad day. As far as impact on daily life didn't occur till later on during the war, maybe 1941, 42, as convoys didn't get through because of the submarine activities. Everybody was rationed. You got, I think if I remember right, 2 ounces of butter each month. I think you got maybe a half a pound of sugar each month. Everything was powdered. Eggs were powdered, potatoes were powdered, milk was powdered. There was very little fruit, apart from whatever fruit you could grow for yourself. So clothes were rationed, petrol was rationed, everything was rationed. People just made do with what they had, like fuel, because at that time in most homes, coal was the main supply of both heat and also for hot water. And of course, coal was a vital industry for the war, and so you rationed on coal. So a lot of times, if you got some coal, you could light a fire. If not, you just put more clothes on.
Did you understand anything because you were so young?
Oh yeah. And when the bombing really got severe, I can remember, the air raid sirens would go. Everything was blacked out. All the windows were covered up with black paper or tape. The tape was to stop when a bomb landed and the concussion came. The windows usually broke, so to save the windows blowing in, you beside the black paper over the windows, you would put tape on them. That when they broke, then they would just kind of hang there. They wouldn't fly all over the place. So you have to get out of bed. You have a little flashlight, which you kept down on the ground because you weren't supposed to show any light. You went down. There were 2 types of air raid shelters that the government, really, the county, built for each person. There was what they called the Anderson shelter, where they dug the hole in the ground, lined it, and then the metal top went on, and then they put the soil that they dug out of the ground back on top. And then there were the brick type shelters. It was just like a brick room. And on one end there was what they call the blast wall, which was a wall to stop if just break the blast if it came in a sense of direct. And inside were 1, 2, 3, 4 bunk beds, and whatever supplies you wanted to bring in, water, some food, they had lamps, kerosene lamps for heat. And in the beginning of the war, before they built any shelters, if you lived in a house, most houses in the UK at that time or in England had the stairs, but under the stairs was always space. Not like houses nowadays, and that's where you went. if you lived near an underground, you went down into the subway and spent the night down there. Yeah, I actually remember coming home from school. In those days, if you had to walk home from school, which you did, you'd have what they called an air warden. That was usually somebody who was retired, too old to join the military, but they were in like the Home Guard or he was a warden, and they would come in and walk the kids. You'd walk as a group home, and if there happened to be dogfights going on between fighter planes, you know, the idea was they get you over to the closest wall, and everybody got down behind the wall, and you had your gas mask with you, because everybody by this time had been issued a gas mask just in case there were any gas attacks. Fortunately, there weren't. But at night time, living close to a large city as Liverpool was, and being important because of the fact that it was a naval, there was a lot of naval shipyard around Liverpool. We had just about every night, it must have been 1940, 41, 42, Liverpool got bombed every night. And the town I lived in, Birkenhead. I can remember the main road ran down, and at the bottom it took a sharp curve, and at the end, right where the curve was, there was the gas works, you know, for making gas for your home like we do here, and they had the gasometers. You know what a gasometer is? Well, the planes used to line up, and you could see the tracer bullets going down as they try and blow the gasometers up. So yeah, as a kid, I can remember a lot of them. You'd go at school. Each school had a program where they had a competition to see who could collect the most shrapnel. Shrapnel was what's left of a bomb when it's gone off or explodes, or a landmine, or a lot of landmines, because they dropped a lot of landmines on parachutes. So you'd go around, and because they changed, you'd go out every morning, and if a raid had been extra heavy or that some bomb landed close, you know, you'd see houses that were there the night before were now gone. Fortunately, most people had already gone to the shelters, so there was a lot of casualties, but you didn't see a lot of casualties. So you scrounge around and see what kind of shrapnel you could find, or if there was a plane that had been brought down. All the kids used to make a beeline to see what they could scrounge up before the police. Because usually the Home Guard, which again were people, or like something like the United States National Guard, but these were all older people who were too old for regular military service. But they were issued rifles and ammunition and uniforms, and they were what they call the Home Guard. And they would be the ones that would go out, and if a plane did crash, land or crash, they would surround it and make sure, you know, people didn't get into trouble. Ships, again, Liverpool, they mined the River Mersey, which runs between Birkenhead, Liverpool, Rockbury, Port Whitehall, all these different places around there. So every now and again you just hear a tremendous thud, you know, and the house would shake, and usually that meant a ship had hit a mine and boom, had gone up.
Okay, so you were too young to be in the war, but did you know anybody who was in the war?
Oh yeah. My dad was in the war in the beginning, and then he he was like how can I put it, a dispatch rider, and he had an accident on his motorcycle, and he had a real bad break on his leg, so one leg finished up shorter than the other, so he got demobilized in that sense, and then he joined the Home Guard. And then the gentleman that lived next door to us went right through the war. He was with the 8th Army in the desert, which was the desert campaign against Rommel. He was one of the desert, they called them the desert rats. Rommel was the desert fox, and the British the desert rats. So yeah, and there were other people. And then of course, then I met a lot of people that came back from the war. Most of the teachers at school. Most of my teachers at school until after the war finished were lady teachers, because all the men teachers had already been called up and were in service.
Were there any types of preparations that were made because you were in school and you were so young? Did they try to train you guys in case anything had happened?
Yeah, well, like I say, everybody had a gas mask. When you went anywhere, you went in groups. If the air raid sirens went when you were in school, everybody headed for we had a like a mess hall, you might say, that everybody went to, and then people in those days, you made your own way, even though your folks at that time, sometimes your folks were too busy to come and get you, so you had to walk home. Well, we always walked home from school, but you went as a group, and the group had the wardens with them, and they're the ones that kind of got you backwards and forwards. Like I say, everything was rationed, everything was dark, there were no street lights, all the railings and anything made of metal had already been cut down, because they needed that for the armament industry. For a kid, even though it was a war, and I know you knew there was a war, and you got the report, you heard the radio, I can remember Winston Churchill's speeches to the country, but for a kid it was still exciting, I mean, you knew, you really didn't realise what kind of carnage was going on in different places. I went out and, like I say, row after row of houses, just gone up, just bombs all on bricks. Liverpool, like I say, was just, they decimated the city centre. There was none of the stores, all that. The underground system being the top part of the underground had really been decimated. The railway stations, Liverpool had two big railway stations. They were just, in tatters. It was that kind of thing you could see. But still, your folks came in, they got you out of bed, you had to get out of bed, you got wrapped up, you had to get down to the air raid shelter. You hear the bangs going, you could hear the guns and see the flashes from the guns firing back. The barrage balloons were all over the place. Every now and again one would break loose, you'd get a barrage balloon floating around. We went over to my grandmother's again one time. This is when about 1942, and my dad they found an incendiary bomb. The whole bomb. It had landed, but it hadn't gone off. Incendiary bombs were the ones they dropped to start the fires, so that the bombers coming in afterwards could use the fires as a guide to where they should be going. And we toted this bomb around with us in the car. We took it over to my grandmother's, because my grandmother lived out in the country, and the only time they got bombed was sometimes if some of the bombers were being chased by fighters and they were heading back, they just dumped the bombs anywhere just to get the weight off so they could go faster. So, but people living out in the country really didn't get to see. So we should take stuff like that over to show them what the war was really like. And then in Pearl Harbor, the Americans came into the war. That obviously was a big thing, because now the British had some support. Though, like I say, all munitions, planes, stuff came into the United States. If I'm going through in pretty weak shape, if they didn't get through, you see sometimes they ran at all. They were really on minimum ration. I saw an orange. Nobody wanted to be a British soldier. Everybody wanted to be a German soldier because they were winning. It was funny the way it was. Not everybody thought, I don't want to be on that side. I want to be on the other side. But as a kid, it's amazing. As a kid, you can put up with a lot, and you just winter came, and it was it was kind of cold, especially like I say, if you didn't get any fuel. a lot of times, you were scrounging around to try and find wood to burn. And, if it snowed, which it sometimes did, sometimes we got some good snow, everybody would be out with a toboggan, or a sled as we called it, and, you just, for a kid, life kind of went on pretty much the same as far as you went to school, you came home. On vacation time, you didn't go away on holiday. There was no going away on holiday because there was nowhere to go. And I say, my family was fortunate because we always had a car, but getting gasoline was awfully hard because gasoline was terribly rationed. Like trying to get shoes, you couldn't buy shoes. Because leather was something they needed. Anything like that went towards the war effort, the civilians definitely didn't. And then, like I say, everybody had a ration book and you had coupons, and you could only use so many coupons to buy so much. Like potatoes. Sometimes you could buy a pound of potatoes. Sometimes you couldn't get any potatoes. Bread. Sometimes there was bread. Sometimes there was no bread. In that sense. But again, as the parents made sure the kids got theirs first. So you really didn't notice it apart from like things like ice cream, candy, cookies, cakes, and so that was no sugar. So you never got any of that kind of stuff. No.
So, despite like not having food and all this, were you actually like bombed or something?
Yeah.
I mean, was your house actually hit?
Not hit in a direct hit, just all the windows. In fact, I think my grandfather got the windows put back in about 3 times. After that, we just boarded them up and left them. Waste of time. The closest we came to getting hit, a landmine came down on a parachute, and the house, we lived in a big 4-story home, big old house, and had a whole row of chimney pots, and each chimney had about 3 or 4 pots coming up with it for the different fires in the house. And as it was coming down, it swiped all the chimney pots off the roof, floated over, and landed. It kept on going, but far enough away to when it hit and went off. And that was the time it blew all the windows out, and we just had to get it, and it flattened the whole row of houses that were just down from where we live. Yeah, I saw a lot of damage as far as houses being bought off. Terrible lot of damage.
And do you remember like the major battles like D-Day and stuff like that? I
remember like the death battles, because before D-Day there were nobody was in Europe till after D-Day, but they were in South Africa, in Africa, fighting, and that was the first turnaround, was the Battle of El Alamein, when Montgomery defeated Rommel, and that was the start of the pushback. And I remember the D-Day 6th of June when because again, living where we did on a port, just 24 hours a day, all you saw was convoys of armored personnel carriers, troops, aeroplanes that were on trucks with the wings alongside them, going to assembly points to be, put together ready for, and troops, thousands and thousands of troops scattered all over England. And I lived in a place where, not just outside Manchester, which was about 30 miles away, was Burtonwood, which was most likely was a big American supply base. Big, still is. We had another big American base at Sealand, which was maybe 15 miles away. So we had a lot of American troops, and Canadian troops, South African troops, troops from India that would join the war. You got the whole melting pot. England was like, you wondered why it didn't sink. There were so many people out there at the time. But of course the invasion took place from the southern coast of England over to where did they land? When they invaded Normandy. So they left from the southern part of England. Everybody converged there at the very end. But
so how did the media, like, from what you know now, what was the media telling you back then? I mean,
well, again, propaganda from both sides. You could, on the radio, you'd sometimes get the German propaganda, Lord Horror, that's what they called it. And of course, the news that was given to the English people, there was also, they tried to keep the bad news toned down as much as possible, and so you got propaganda from both sides. I mean, you know, people never really knew how bad a shape we were in, really, in that sense. Nobody realised how close to being invaded Britain came, and what it would have been like if they had been invaded. Could they have stopped it? But of course, once the Americans got into the war, then it took some of the weight off. And of course, by this time the Germans had already opened the Russian front, which took a lot of weight off. So it gave Britain a little bit of breathing space and a chance to recover. But like I say, growing up during the war, yeah, I remember it vividly. I can remember, like, you know, at night time you went out and there wasn't a light. It was pitch black, no lights. All the car, if you had a car, they had attachments they put on your headlights, it was a waste of time having the headlights on, really, because through these attachments you couldn't. With no petrol, the buses used to tow this kind of like a boiler behind them. And the boiler was actually a way of making gas. They ran the engines on a kind of a gas, and that was just to preserve petrol, because petrol was really crucial to the oil, petrol and oil to the war effort.
Were there like restrictions placed on people, like where they could go and how late they could go out and stuff like that? Not so much
curfews in that sense, no. All they did was, a lot of times, I can remember coming home, again, we'd been to my grandmother's and we were coming home, and a policeman flagged us down. It was like a roadblock. A policeman flagged us down, and we had room in the car for like one more person. And what they were doing was, there being obviously some sort of a push on somewhere, and they were calling soldiers back up that had been on leave. So people with private cars going into Liverpool, which was an embarkation point. The police got stopped and they said, look, we want you to carry three people. We want you to carry these three people and drop them off. For those who want to get one, so those are the things they do. The only thing you could really get into was if they could show one line, if you had one line, not keep you in the window and show one line. I remember 2,000 restrictions. No, anyway. You could go over the trains, basically service, CC, a lot of passenger trains. Everything was turned over to the military. My dad is a little bit, yeah.
Do you remember specifically how he thought about it, or is he thinking about it?
My dad was joining the army, so he was a professional soldier before the war started. He was in the tank operations. I don't know, I didn't see a lot of my dad before he got into it and got out of it. I didn't see him when he came back home. He worked at an American air base, and he'd sometimes go out and he wouldn't come home for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So I don't ever remember really talking about the war growing up as a kid. I mean, you knew it was there. Everybody just kind of bit the bullet and went about life as normal as you possibly could. You just had to make sure you when the air raid sirens went, you just made sure you got to the shelter. Everybody that was in school, you got out of the classrooms. A lot of children were what they call evacuated. They were especially people like London, the Midlands, people like that lived in the Liverpool, but any of the major cities like London
also specifically when you're talking about election, do you feel like your community can pull together and try to help each other instead of talking about personally?
Yeah, there's a lot of closeness. Things like wars and things like that tend to bring you, tend to bring people closer. So yeah, a lot of people did help out one another. And as soon as you're short of something, when you do, well, if one person had a big family, say like 4 or 5 kids, people would maybe give them some of the components to get something a little bit extra. At Christmas time, you find a lot of people, there's nothing to buy for Christmas gifts. I buy my wife every Christmas gift I got, or a hand-me-down, or a homemade thing. Something they make like that, something wooden or whatever it was, and a wooden fort, and you may get a few little lead soldiers to go with the wooden fort, and that was your Christmas gift. But that kind of thing, so a lot of people would go out of the way to try and make sure. And of course, some people did it because they make things and then sell them. I mean, not to kind of extort anybody, but just obviously they had to buy the stuff that they made them with. But yeah, they just sell them for what it cost them. But at least everybody you got a gift. But most of the time, Christmas was pretty sparse, to say the least. There was no Christmas trees, that's for sure.
Were you disappointed, or you just kind of understood?
Yeah, you understood. See, I suppose, even though I think I was about 7 when the bombing really started. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years old. So I really had 2 years of when I kind of understood what was going on. So 2 Christmases went by. You knew this was coming, and there wasn't a lot going on anyway. So when the war did start, it wasn't like as if you'd been spoiled before, and then all of a sudden everything was cut off. As far as gifts go, yeah, I don't know. I don't remember ever being kind of disappointed, because I really wasn't old enough to know a lot better as far as getting gifts go. Like I say, and again, if you've never had anything like like oranges, lemons, bananas, cantaloupes, things like that, I'd never had them anyway. So I didn't know what they were. So that didn't bother me. I finally got one. I thought, boy, have I been missing all this stuff?
So, do you remember anything from the other countries during the war, like Germany and the Holocaust and stuff?
Only I remember the Holocaust only after the war, when they opened. I remember them. See, again, you've got to remember, we had no TV. Everything you got was radio or newspapers. And of course, during the war, whatever came over the radio was strictly what they wanted you to hear. And what went in the paper was strictly what they wanted you to read. But you heard about some of the atrocities, and then the first time I ever saw anything about the Holocaust was right after the war, when they got into the camps. Was the newsreels at the theatres. Now, talking about theatres, yeah, there were still movies, and most of the movies were, most of them were to do with the war, and most of them were kind of like propaganda films to boost your morale, to make you think. And a lot of times, even now on our TV, you'll find some of the old wartime movies that were made to kind of boost morale and make people think, well, we're not doing too bad when we're getting hammered.
Well, do you feel that when you hear about war these days on TV and stuff, about the Kosovo incidents and stuff, do you have any personal opinions to those? Because you've already been through and you know.
Again, it's different when somebody invades. Being lucky, living on an island, we were not invaded. So the war was, though it was close and it was brought home by the bombing and the fact that the ships not getting through and things like that. Nobody ever invaded England. So you weren't under anybody else's control, and you weren't moved around and told where to go. So that part of it, I can relate to only from what I think you would feel like. But I'm sure, when I see these people in Kosovo right now, like where they're discriminately just surrounding villages with tanks and shelling, and I just heard on the way in today that there's another 20 people that they just took out and executed. That kind of thing, obviously you relate to it from what you feel just by thinking about what it would be like, but with not having experienced it firsthand, that's kind of hard to, apart from your own emotional feelings, which I think it's terrible that war is bad enough, but you should, but war on innocent civilians is, there's no glory, honor and glory in that, believe me, no.
How was life after the war? Recovery?
It took a long time. We were on, I think, if I remember right, we were on rations for at least 2 full years after the war. We were still using ration books and coupons, and things were in short supply. It started to get better, obviously, because now a lot more stuff could come in. And then they had the, after the war, you kids won't remember, but when they had the Berlin, when Berlin was blockaded, the Russians wouldn't let any convoys come in. And of course, what they did, they airlifted everything to Berlin. Coal, fuel, everything, food, anything you can think of was airlifted in. Just thousands and thousands of planes coming from England, mainly from England. That was the jump-off point. A lot of the food and stuff came from the United States. So that delayed it as well, because instead of this food going now to see, shall we say, like England and these countries, it was all shipped over to Berlin to break the blockade. But eventually it got back to normal, and the lights went back on, and the movie theaters opened again. You didn't have to have stuff on your windows again. Life slowly but surely got back to normal. So the war finished, if I'm not mistaken, 1946. And I'd say by about 1950, which was like 4 years later, we were somewhat back to normal.
Do you remember ever in life being completely like 100% back to normal, or was it?
Oh yeah. Once I got into my later teens and in my 20s, life was back to normal. You could go. There were some restrictions. If you went on vacation at that time in the UK, they wouldn't let you take so much money out of the country. So it really cramped on going on vacation. But the first time I went on vacation out of the country was in Spain, and things were pretty much getting back to normal by then. Yeah, it was a lot. In those days, people in the UK still rode bicycles. There was quite a few cars, but nothing like there is now. So by that time things were getting back to normal. So it was just a gradual uphill battle till it got back to people. There was no more rationing. Everything was plentiful: butter, cheese, bacon, eggs, everything. Yeah, there was plenty of stuff then. Yeah.
Do you remember, did Winston Churchill ever make any motivational speeches?
Oh yeah, I remember the speech about after the Battle of Britain. Never in the course of human history have so many owed so much to so few. and the speech about at the beginning of the war, he came to the United States and he made a speech about the fact that in Liverpool there's a building called the Liver Buildings, and liver birds are on top, and liver birds are something like the phoenix. They burn into ashes and then they resurrect again. And these were two big bronze birds on top of the Liver Buildings, and I think it was Goring, who was in charge of the Air Force in Germany, said he'd make the liver birds fly. and he didn't make them fly, though it's amazing how they didn't hit, because that was one of the big buildings right on the waterfront, and everything around it was ablaze, but somehow they didn't get hit. And somebody else said they would wring England's neck like a chicken, and Churchill said, some chicken. So, yeah.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about in particular?
Only, like I say, it's hard for somebody, if you haven't been through it, and the part I went through, like I say, wasn't like the part that most of Europe went through, because they were occupied. France, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, they were occupied. They were under the control of the German army. So that I can't relate to. But as far as the bombing goes, the shortages, just going out and seeing how fast they could change the scenery, because you'd go out and be a row of houses, you'd go out next day and that row of houses would be gone, just flattened. I remember one thing that did ring a bell after the war. When you went over to Liverpool, and it wasn't until after the war that they really started cleaning the bombed out buildings up. They just, they were dangerous, they pulled them down, but a lot of them, they left that. After the war, they went in and they cleaned them up, and they had more parking lots. It's just, they made them into parking lots. Not that they were a lot of cars, but they were being rebuilt now. And if you go to Liverpool, it's amazing how countries get over it. Liverpool is a city, London is the same way. Coventry, they bombed Coventry until there wasn't one brick left on another brick. They flattened Coventry completely. 24 hours a day around the clock, bombing. But you go to Coventry now, the only thing you can see is inside the new cathedral, they left the remains of the old cathedral. That's still inside. And so, you talk to most kids about the Second World War, and they really don't know what you're talking about, which is the way it should be. That's the way it should be. You shouldn't have to go back. It's good to remember that these things can happen if you're not careful, and that you should be vigilant and alert to the fact that when you're free and you can do things and you start to take things for granted, familiarity tends to breed consent and can always be taken away from you. And once it's taken away, it's awfully hard to get back.
So the war has changed the way from today?
It only in a sense of, like I say, you don't take things for granted. It can happen. People tend to think, oh no, nothing like that can happen, but it can. I'm sure these people in these villages in Kosovo never thought they were going to be pounded, and it leaves a lasting memory. But you get over it. Human nature or humankind have an awful lot of resurgency. They can kind of bounce back.
Is there anything that you'd want to say to whoever watches this, or for them that you want them to know? Or
just to say that I hope they never have to go through it, and just remember that when you get old enough, get out and vote. Because that's the kind of thing that lets these things happen. When people start to lose interest, they can't be bothered, and there's more things going on, and they don't want to be bothered. That's how these things start. So it's something to remember. And it's always good to look back on it. It's always good to look back on it, because and I think that's one of the reasons a lot of times they show these movies is just to jog people's memory that it can happen, and it's happening right now. It's happening right now.